We have two deans. We have Ron Wilcox, who's a Senior Associate Dean at the Darden School of Business in University of Virginia. And we have Alfred Yeager, who is from the McGill University School, Faculty of Management. Des Hotels. And Alfred is the Director of the MBA program. And Ron runs the MBA program at Darden. So, have a seat. So, we want to talk a little bit about, the value of the MBA, why people get it, who gets it, how valuable is it as a tool to transition one's career, reinvent oneself. We want to talk about the cost of the degree because, it can be quite costly for a lot of people. And the return on investment, and we want to talk about what do you actually learn in an MBA program. So this is more about the nitty-gritty of what the degree delivers, and what you have to pay to get it, and what you have to go through to get it, and less about how to get in. Because you just heard from admission directors, and their job basically is to assess candidates and tell you how to get in. So I'm going to start really with something that occurred 10 years ago. This is the week that it's a 10-year anniversary for the demise of Lehman Brothers on Wall Street and the onset of the global recession. And when that occurred, and maybe some of you are so young and you didn't really feel the pain of that event, but it was quite frightening for a lot of people all over the world. And a lot of people blamed MBAs for that disaster. Ron, do you think MBAs were to blame for the global crisis 10 years ago?
No. That is sort of that's a convenient, sort of simplistic view of what happened, right?
Yes.
It's easy to blame some sort of small group of rapacious MBAs for some kind of world catastrophe, when the reality is a lot more complicated than that. To talk about what caused that would take a long time, but before that happened, some years before that happened, there was a wave of financial deregulation in the United States, and that produced some very good things, some great innovations in the marketplace from which consumers benefited. Easier to get a house, in some cases easier to invest your retirement. There were good things that came out of that, but one thing that came out of it was everybody's business was kind of in every other person's business. So when there was a contagion, it spread through the economy and the world economy very rapidly. I think it is a function much more of the system than a few group of greedy people who were set out to do evil deeds in the world economy. No, that's talk show radio stuff. It's not really what happened. So,
Alfred, do you agree?
Well, I maybe take a different perspective on it. Now, I teach organizational behavior, and at one point, some of my colleagues at that time were quite willing to blame the finance guys, and that was more.
I think one of your famous professors was right
as well. But if you look at these types of things have happened before. I mean, greed is not necessarily bad, but all the parties were trying to make money. So the person who couldn't really afford a mortgage, when it was offered to them, they took it because there was a collective belief that house prices would keep going up, and they'd been going up since World War II, and they never came down. And then all of a sudden, lo and behold, they came down. So people were making assumptions and sharing them. And just sort of looking at the past and trying to predict the future. So if the house prices have kept on going up, a lot of these mortgages would have been valuable. But then there was a breaking point, and some people were able to predict it, but they weren't listened to, and the banks were overextended. I would say we used to complain that the Canadian banks were too conservative, and about 2008 we were really happy they were conservative because they had very limited exposure.
That's true.
Because
these
mortgages.
Canada was much less affected. The banking system here was pretty solid.
Pretty solid.
It really was.
Controlled and very conservative, and we used to bellyache about that, but not anymore.
One consequence of what happened is that finance became less of a recruiter of MBAs. Even when you look at the traditional finance schools in America, like Columbia, NYU, Wharton, the percentage of people going into finance from those schools, where traditionally more than half of their MBA output would go into finance, much less now, significantly less. And that's kind of been replaced to a large degree by technology. Amazon now recruits 1,000 MBAs a year. Before we came on stage, Ron told me that this year, Amazon is sending 30 recruiters to the Darden School. And they're going to interview how many people? Anyone who wants an interview.
They will. The numbers that I have seen suggest that they might interview a third of the class.
1/3 of the class, which is remarkable because Amazon is growing so rapidly, and it has become, other than computer scientists, a very much an MBA company with very desirable product management jobs. But do you think that the reason fewer MBAs are going into finance is because finance needs fewer of them? Or do you think that MBAs prefer not to go into finance after what happened 10 years ago? What do you think?
I think that both of those things are true. I think immediately after it, in particular, if you were going to go to Goldman Sachs and take a job, you'd have to sort of apologize to your relatives, right? Why would you go to the evil empire and take a job?
Or as a Rolling Stone writer called Goldman Sachs, the vampire squid of Wall Street,
I think
something like that.
Right. And I think a little bit of that's still there. I don't think that went away entirely. At the same time, I think the average MBA, good MBA students interested in technology-related fields has simply gone up. And so the desire of the students, perhaps partly rooted in the negative associations with the finance industry, but I think partly just because it's really exciting to go to some of these companies that are technology forward in that space, has driven a shift in recruiting. In fairness, the big banks and things like that still recruit.
Yes.
I think where the inroads have happened is like investment management and things like that have backed off a lot more, and a lot more of those students are saying, I'd have more fun and be more interested in going into technology.
Yeah.
So.
You find the same in Canada?
Yeah, well, I'd say our students, we have a strong finance area and we have a strong interest in finance. And because in 2008 we didn't have the same impact here, I think people continue to go into finance. And when we look at our students who are going into finance, in the financial area, a lot of them with the big banks or insurance companies and more I don't know, solid is maybe not the right word, but institutions who have weathered the last 10, 20 years just fine. Right. We haven't sent that many to New York or to Goldman Sachs. We do have students there, and we have undergrads that go there as well. So that's maybe there's a bit of that notion of maybe you don't want to go there. But these days, the institutions who hire, like banks, insurance companies, they're as solid and sought after as they always have been.
Why do companies hire MBAs?
Oh, I think they want a flexible skill set. They're trying to hire somebody that they're going to have for a long time, and as opposed to some degrees which have a narrow skill set. An MBA, you might get in the door because you know how to do finance, but my colleague over here is an organizational behavior faculty member, and he'll tell you, but 5 or 10 years down the road, you end up having to learn how to manage other people as well. So you end up needing a diverse skill set. So I think the people that come get MBAs desire to have a flexible skill set because they see themselves as leaders in an organization. And if you're going to be a leader in an organization, a more narrowly tailored accounting degree can be great for some professions,
right?
But not if you're leading a large, complex organization. It's just more demanding in terms of the diversity of skills that you'll need to do that. And I think that's why people want the degree, and I think that's why recruiters come and seek after people with that degree.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would second that. And yesterday I was kind of reflecting on what's changed and what hasn't changed in MBAs, because I've been involved with the MBA program on and off for over 25 years at McGill. And what hasn't changed is people are looking for career change. They say, okay, I've gone so far, I've gone this direction, I think I want to shift gears. And so that person who has shifted gears has that kind of mix. They have a greater variety of skills. They have a broader background. a little bit more mature than somebody who's just right out of school, who has done a specialized master's and is sort of in their, still barely in their mid-20s, and the MBAs tend to be early 30s by the time they graduate, and there's a market for those types of folks who may put engineering together with management or finance with engineering, or they go into marketing and they come from a quantitative background.
What percentage of your students would you say switch careers as a result of the MBA?
I'd say the vast majority. You could characterize it as switching career. They're not saying, okay, I'm working at a bank, I'm going to get an MBA and I'm going back to a bank. That rarely happens.
Rarely happens. Same for you, right?
Yeah, it's pretty high.
Yeah.
I don't know the exact percentage, but the substantial majority of people come in with experience in one industry and get a job in another industry after they come out the other side. Yeah.
Now, why is the MBA such a great vehicle to allow someone to not only switch disciplines, switch industries, maybe even then geographies? You know, there's a so-called triple jump where you come in and you change all three: discipline, industry, and your geographic location. Why has the MBA degree become such an effective tool to do that? What do you say?
Well, I would say it's like one of the few degrees where basically you can have any undergraduate degree. You could have a music degree. I mean, you
Right.
have to do the GMAT or something, but you basically have any background, and you can start sort of in a level playing field with everybody else. So it's not like a specialization that you have to, you know, if you want to do a master's in mathematics, you got to have a mathematics undergrad.
Right.
So it takes everybody, and people who maybe didn't quite know what they wanted to do when they grew up, when they were 20, and they may not know until they're 25, and then it's time to shift gears.
Yeah, I agree. I think partly it's the flexible skill set that we talked about before, but I think there's also sort of an issue that's probably unrelated to the material being taught, and that is when you go to an MBA program, whether it's Darden or someplace else, you mix it up with a lot of people who are going to do a lot of different things with their lives, and you're going to see a lot of different employers, and some jobs that you may not even have considered in your life are suddenly sitting there in front of your face. So it's a learning process that's taking place not in a classroom, but just among your peers, among the other students, among the recruiters, and it's kind of the discovery process, and all of a sudden you thought, well, I'm going to go into consulting, but you never thought about this particular niche in healthcare, and all of a sudden you get interested in that, and that's the way you go. I just think there's a lot of that going on.
Is a one-year MBA program as effective at allowing someone to make a career transition like this as a two-year program?
I'm sorry, I don't think so, and I'll tell you why. Partly it's 1 year versus 2 years of content, okay, so you just more content. But part of the process of an MBA, if you're coming in and switching careers, is to have a summer internship between your first and your second year. Almost all the students do that, and that's the time where you're kind of shopping what you'd like to do when you get out, and you're getting exposed to maybe an employer does something completely different than what you did when you came in. And I just think that, even as much as maybe the extra classroom material, is highly instructive to yourself about what you want to do when you leave, and that's just kind of where I come down on that.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. Our students can do a summer internship, and sometimes it can stretch into the fall. And so they have a much broader experience. Also, you have two classes in-house at the same time. So you have the first year class getting advice from the second year class, and that kind of dynamic disappears if you have a one-year program.
That's true, and a lot of programs now actually have second years who help mentor and coach first-year students. Yeah.
They help coach, they
So
help
you lose
recruit,
that. Yeah.
they help orient, so their whole, it's a different experience if
Yeah.
you're just with the same cohort for 1 year.
Like our clubs, I don't know how, but our clubs, which are student clubs, the second year students help the first year students prep for like interviews and things like that in the disciplines that they're interested in going. And we have a wonderful career center, and I think it's great that the students help because they probably give a perspective that we as professionals could never give them.
Yeah.
So.
And there are certain jobs that you really need coaching for. If you want to make a transition to consulting, is a good example. Yeah. Those interviews are case-oriented. They can be pretty grueling. To have the advice of a second year who went through that process to help bring you through, rehearse you, practice, could make a very big difference to whether or not you get a job in consulting. Right?
Yep. Absolutely.
you've also got a network. These
Right.
guys go out and get jobs, and you know them.
Yes.
And they're at the company you would like to go to. They'll give you the inside scoop.
Right.
And the networking is important too.
And then you have employers who actually want to hire interns, meaning they want to try you out.
Yeah.
And an internship gives them that opportunity to give you a really good look, to decide if they want to hire you. And everyone is trying to minimize risk. The schools are trying to minimize risk of a bad admit, and employers are trying to minimize the risk of a bad hire, and the system is all around that, minimizing risk of mistakes. And that's another reason why employers love MBAs, because it's generally a pretty rigorous program, particularly the core, and the admission standards at the better schools are quite tough. So employers really like that. People who are sitting here probably look at the price tag of a degree, and people out there who are watching us on a live stream, and I bet you a lot of them are shocked. Because you look at the price and then you calculate your opportunity cost of going when giving up a job for almost 2 years. And it becomes a very expensive proposition. Does the MBA cost too much right now?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
If you do a rational return on investment calculation, it is true that it pays for itself and then some. It's a good investment. I think it costs too much. I think when it has the kind of sticker prices that MBA programs have, that some people, just the level of debt that they would have to take on in order to enroll in the program scares them.
Yeah.
And some very talented people don't enroll that should really be enrolling in the program. With that said, I will tell this audience that when you are shopping around for MBA programs, please don't let sticker prices scare you away. Because, for example, at Darden, I know our first-year student numbers, 2/3 of our students are on scholarship. 2 years ago, that was 40%. Now it's 2/3. And that's 2/3 because my boss, the dean of the school, has gone out and raised a lot of scholarship money because he believes, and he and I are completely aligned on this, that it is just, I'm going to use a word probably, it is a moral imperative to get the cost, and that's the tuition plus the opportunity cost of these MBA degrees down so that more audiences can access them.
Yeah. And there is a lot of scholarship money out there.
Absolutely. I mean, we pretty much everybody gets some support. Almost everybody gets some support, and it can be as high as a good portion of the tuition. We're also seeing that the market is quite competitive. We're seeing other schools doing exactly what you said, offering more and more scholarships. So we're kind of having to scramble a little bit, but we're trying to match those, and we do see the same thing. The investment. I mean, if you're in your late 20s, which is a typical age, it's a bit daunting to say I'm going to take on tens of thousands of dollars in debt. If you're sitting, 20, 30 years later, say it's a figure on a sheet, but it's emotionally hard to take. But yeah, the sticker, there's a sticker price shock, but most students do get scholarships. We're also very actively raising scholarships and funding students, so they do get support.
So really, the real price of an MBA to a large degree is invisible to the buyer, at least when they have to make the decision to apply. Why don't you just bring down the sticker price and forget about the scholarship money? I mean, what's the game that's going on here that's not quite visible to everybody?
There's a word for it.
Yeah.
It's called price discrimination. You'll learn about this in graduate business school. Why give away a product to somebody who's willing to pay full price?
Sure.
Right? So to take a higher price and then discount it to people that can't pay the full price. So that's just sort of an economically rational argument, and it's what drives price discrimination, and not just our market, but lots of markets, airline markets, movie ticket markets, all kinds of markets. However, I think when the sticker price does get so high, that rational model fails to capture the dynamics of what some things are happening in the market. If you're coming from a family that doesn't have a lot of money, or just the thought of taking on that kind of debt just may scare you. And even if the return on investment is outstanding, it could drive you to not do something that you really should be doing. So I think we've reached, price discrimination was the answer to the question you posed to me, but I think we're reaching the limits of price discrimination. Yeah. I really do.
Because as you pointed out before, many people are discouraged, yeah, and they're really great candidates, and yeah, they're not applying. They're not in the pool because they're scared of the right price.
And you come here, so one of the values you come in here is listen to us talk. Don't let that happen to you.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of scholarship dollars. Don't let it scare you.
There's a lot of money out there. Now let's say I get a scholarship from one school that I was admitted to, and then I get an admit from one of your two schools. Do I have any negotiating power or not really?
I'd try.
Alfred, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's competition, and we have candidates that, you know, that come back and say, well, you know, I got this from, you know, we at least listen to them.
Yeah, I'd try. You know, but from my standpoint, think about my standpoint, I'm an administrator sometimes sitting on the other side of this,
exactly,
right? You know, how credible is it?
Right.
How do I have to sort of judge? You know, is this credible? Is it not credible? Do I spend the money here? Do I not spend the money here? And if I were advising you, which is I feel like the role that I'm in, absolutely try. I don't know if you'll be successful all the time, but it doesn't. I can't see any downside to trying.
Yeah, it can't hurt you, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're not going to be outraged and say,
right,
"Oh, we made a mistake."
That's wrong. They are trying to negotiate with you. No. So,
yeah. And I think, you know, the price has become more of an issue for millennials because many of them are leaving undergraduate institutions with some debt to begin with. For whatever reason, you know, there's some research out there that shows millennials are a little more less eager to take on some more debt. So that's a factor as well. But there is a lot of money out there. Schools are competing with each other with scholarship offers for the best students. So, you know, I think everyone's advice up here is don't let the sticker price scare you. In fact, just based on the sticker price alone, the payback on an MBA, a two-year MBA, is typically about 3.5 to 4 years. So within 3.5 or 4 years of working, you make all the investment that you already made, and then everything else is on top of that, and that's without scholarship funds. And that's at some of the more expensive institutions with very high price tags. I mean, it's shocking for me because I see sometimes there are quite a few American schools where MBAs are coming out with six-figure debt now. Yeah. I mean, as many as 10 of the top schools, when people borrow, and not everyone does borrow, they're coming out with debt in excess of $100,000 on the MBA. But, you know, here's the deal. If you got a job at a top consulting firm, the starting offer is $140,000, and the sign-on bonus is $25,000, and that goes a long way to helping pay down debt. Your internship is an income-producing opportunity as well, and you're really not out of the workforce for a full 2 years. So you got to really factor all that into it. So what do people learn in an MBA program? Sure, they learn the basics of accounting, finance, marketing, strategy, organizational behavior, operations, but let's say that's a given. What else do they learn in a really good MBA program? Alfred?
Well, you talked about the core. They learn in a program like ours, for example, we're 70% international. They learn working with other people. They get used to being with different kinds of people. They get exposed. We have a number of courses where they're exposed to business leaders. They meet and talk to business leaders. We do a lot of training, career prep training for interviewing CVs, and I'm sure other schools do the same thing. So you're learning how to, first of all, figure out who you are, what you want, bounce that off what you've learned. You know, you want to make a shift. We have students say, oh, I think I want to come and do marketing, and they come and say, oh, marketing isn't for me. So then there's resources to help them to go in a different direction. So there's a lot of career counseling. They learn about networking. We do an international study trip, so they get an exposure to another culture. So a number of things along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, I'd associate myself with all of those comments in terms of what they own. Exposure to international audiences, if you haven't had that before. This is Toronto. You're already in a pretty diverse environment in Toronto, but you learn working with other people. I'd say there's probably a couple other things that you learn. One is more classroom related. Of course, all the business disciplines, but you learn how to deal with ambiguity, which is really hard for, that is hard. That may sound easy, but when there's a big decision on the line and you don't have all the information, making a decision anyway, in light of the information that you do have. And I also think, and this is really not class related, you learn some pretty complex time management skills and prioritization skills. In an MBA program, in a good MBA program, you are going to have more interesting things to attend and do than you possibly have time to do. It is not, you are not going to be bored. You are going to have to say no to some things. And that process of saying no, I think, is a difficult process, but one you have to learn early on, because if you're in that program, that means you're talented. You're probably going to go to a job where, particularly as the years roll by, there's more and more complex situations, and there's more situations where people are calling you on the phone or emailing and saying, you know, Ron, will you really get involved in this? Will you really get involved with that? And you have to say, no, I can't, because I have to focus on this other stuff. And that's an important life skill. And I think an MBA, even relative to other graduate degrees, forces the issue a little bit with respect to those kind of skills.
Yeah. So as I hear you speak, you know, I'm hearing a lot about personal development, which you don't get in any other academic program. I mean, really. And the personal development is different than professional development. You're really, you know, I'm not going to say psychoanalyzing some of your students, but there's a degree of assessment and counseling in a good MBA program that really helps you as an individual figure out what you really want out of your life, and that you don't get in any other academic discipline anywhere. And that is a special and important part of what an MBA program is. And most business schools in the last 10 years have really laid that on heavy, right? I mean, they've invested heavily in one-on-one coaching and the mentoring part and experiential learning and all these assessments, and then delivering programming that addresses the gaps that you may have that may make you less effective as an individual in a workplace. That's very valuable. Another very thing that's really happened in recent years is this need to understand data so that it can be interpreted for business decisions, right? So talk a little bit about data analytics, business analytics, and what role that's playing in your MBA programs now.
So we have a concentration in analytics. Obviously that's growing, and there's a growing interest among students. We also have a Master of Management in Analytics, which is more for people without experience, but we're going to be able to build on that because we have in-house expertise, and we have some courses. Some of those courses are much more quantitative and maybe not the right thing for all MBA students, but those who are qualified can take those courses. That's going to, and that's growing. And so we're getting more in-house resources. So we're actually able to take advantage of some synergy of that program with the MBA program. And we're also housed in the same building. The offices are next to each other, so it's we see that as growing.
Right.
Yeah, it's growing, and it's growing a lot, and it's growing rapidly to the extent where I think that data analytics is almost forcing a rethink of some of the core requirements of an MBA program in ways that we probably haven't rethought it as much for a while. We have a dual degree program. If you come in with an engineering or computer science background or technical background, we have a dual degree program, which is an MBA, Master of Science in Data Science, with our Data Science Institute at UVA. That does add some time to the degree, but you get 2 master's degrees out of that. And then we have a data analytics track, and that's usually for someone who's not a mathophobe, but maybe didn't do a computer science or an engineering undergraduate degree. And those are often people that want to go well, the consulting firms like it too.
Yes.
But it's also, if you want to be a product manager in one of the big technology firms, it's not just the marketing they're going to look for, they're going to look for data analytics skills as well. And where we're trying to take it right now, and it's literally some work I did earlier this week, we're trying to not just use Darden content, but develop some curriculum with one of our major employers around data analytics, because we're learning from our major employers what exactly within that broad sphere would make the most sense. And some of the major employers, because they have developed their own internal curriculum for this kind of stuff. And they are motivated for a number of different reasons to work with leading universities to try to make joint arrangements to bring that curriculum into some of the programs. So that's exciting to me. But it's a huge, it's a huge growth area.
And there's a great demand from by employers for these skills, because they're swimming in data, and many of them don't know what to do with it, frankly. So that's become a really important part of the MBA program. Another important part of the MBA program, of course, is your deep dive in electives, because you learn frameworks within any of these disciplines that are very valuable to you that you otherwise would not have any access to. You learn how to do a presentation professionally. Consultants do amazing presentations. You come out of business school, you get up in front of people and you'll be able to whiz through something in a way with command and confidence that you probably otherwise wouldn't have. What do MBA programs do poorly today? Who wants to take that one?
I want to take it, but I want to think about it for 10
Yeah.
seconds.
Yeah, I didn't know.
Well, maybe I'll give you a little prompting, perhaps. What about technology? I think business schools have become very good on the global part of education. And Darden recently got enough money in scholarships to actually pay for all the global trips that MBA students are going to take. But in terms of the systemic use of technology and how it's truly impacted everything we do and how we think and how we live and how we play and how we work, I wonder if MBA programs are not fully immersed in a way with the impact of technology and how important it's become and how disruptive it's become in every market imaginable. What do you think? Yes, no, maybe?
I would tend to agree with that assessment. Again, I'll look at, we have been relatively slow to integrate sort of online learning. We do a little bit of it, but it hasn't, 10, 15 years ago, people said that's the way it's going to go. We don't have an online MBA. We do have but we don't have much in online. At one point, we gave students iPads. Said, okay, now you're going to have this device, and it's going to be your end all and be all of what you need. And we've stopped doing that because there was mixed reaction from the students. Some of it's pushback from the student body, that not everybody has the same need for digital access to things or working with that technology.
And I guess I'm thinking less about educational delivery and more about how technology has changed every a white-collar professional job, in the workplace.
I think it's a fair assessment. I mean, I think you're leveling a criticism, which I think is broadly accurate. I think it's uneven.
Yeah.
I think in certain areas within the business school, if I think about, for example, at Darden, we have a decision analysis area that's extremely facile with technology, and they know SQL and Python, and these are, if you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry about it. Tableau, and I mean, they are immersed in what they need to be immersed in.
Should MBAs in general learn how to code?
Yep, I do.
You do
so.
think that?
I do. I'm not willing to say that. I'm not willing to put my finger down and say it should be a requirement. What I will say is there's a whole lot more jobs now where it's not that you're going to code, but you're going to be dealing with a lot of other people that code, and the basic logic of coding, or the basic logic of a way a computer goes about executing commands, is a logic that is extremely useful for you to know in a lot of business situations. So if it were me getting an MBA program, yeah.
You'd want to know how
I
to
want to
code.
know how, because if I go to a firm that has a really serious data component, really serious engineering component, a lot of the consulting firms that are going into these companies, it's just going to be a big leg up.
Yeah.
And I don't mean like learning to code C,
Right.
but I'm learning like what is a function, how to again, don't worry if you don't, how does a computer deal with a string of variables? There is a certain way in which that is like a foreign language. You need to get the logic of it, and then you can be part of the conversation. So,
Agreed.
So,
Yeah, I would second that, and we sort of had that conversation. You know, how at our school, how is the MBA with an analytics concentration different from a Master of Management Analytics? And the MBA with the analytics concentration is people who learn how to do that. And I'd say we're looking at our review of our core, and we'll probably bring that also into the core, because I sort of take it for granted. I had an engineering background and you know, did Fortran and some of these other languages that are now historical.
Right.
But the current crop, maybe they don't see what's going on behind the scenes when they're even just on an app and dealing with technology. So yeah, I agree wholeheartedly that understanding how that works would be useful, and pretty much for everybody, at least in the core, and then for people who want to pursue analytics should know that too.
So we have time for a few questions if anyone wants to ask a question. And we have a mic there, so you would have to go to the mic to ask. And you can ask any question you'd like. We're happy to answer. Tell me who you are.
My name is Rosvita Gabuk. Who am I? I'm many things, and I'm from all over the place. I'll let you know when I find out. I missed the introductions. Would you kindly introduce yourselves and let me know what university you represent?
Oh, sure. Ron Wilcox is Senior Associate Dean of the University of Virginia's Darden School of Business. I'm John Byrne. I'm the founder and editor-in-chief of Poets and Quants. And Alfred Yeager is the MBA, director of the MBA program at McGill University's Desautels. I can't always get that. Faculty of Management.
Wonderful.
Okay? So you have a Canadian school, US school.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. I would pose a question, and I'm sorry I missed a few panels, whether there is an MBA program anywhere, either at your school or anywhere. Well, I'm not sure if you would be commenting about any other schools. Is there such a thing as a interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary MBA where a student can design his or her own concentration? Thank you.
okay.
Interesting question.
It is. Let me start at a broad level. An MBA, by its very nature, tends to be interdisciplinary up to a point, right? I mean, his core curriculum, I actually haven't looked at his core curriculum, I bet you it's not going to be too much different than my core curriculum. He's going to have accounting, operations, you know, finance. In terms of designing your own concentration, here, most MBA programs have a core that they're going to require you to take. And that's what we're talking, sort of interdisciplinary, but it's a series of courses you're going to be required to take. After that, generally in a 2-year program, it's mostly in the second year, but some of this goes on in the first year, you have electives. Within electives, it is, I believe, generally true that you have a large degree of, certainly at Darden, you have a large degree of freedom to design your own sequence of electives. And we have concentrations, so that you have concentrations as well. And then we also allow you to take a certain number of courses outside of the Darden school. So if you want to go to the other parts of the University of Virginia and take courses, there's a limit on that, but it's a pretty high limit, actually. So I would say in the second year, there's a lot of flexibility. In the first year, some schools are more flexible than others. I happen to be from a school that is not very flexible, and I would defend the lack of flexibility in the first year. But there are schools that are more flexible than the Darden school, even in the first year. So.
What do you think?
Yeah, I would say a day's hotel is inflexible in the core, but it's the first semester, it's the fall semester. We have 4 concentrations, and the full-time students choose from those concentrations. Our evening program has a so-called general management concentration, as does our MBA Japan program, which is a weekend program. Only because it's hard to fulfill the concentrations. Now there's a demand from the part-time students in Montreal to do concentrations. If you can take some courses beyond the concentration and sort of design your own program. Now, I was in an MBA program when I was doing my PhD, and it didn't have concentrations. You basically marketed yourself to the employers with, I did this, this, and this is who I am. It is technically possible at McGill, but students are encouraged to do one of the existing concentrations, not the general management concentration.
And can you take courses outside the business school?
You can, but very few people actually do.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate, but somehow we're a kind of a small community and family-like, and they don't want to venture over. And I'm pleased to hear that at Darden that is the case.
I noticed that I said that they can.
Oh, they don't.
As a rule, few do.
A few do. I mean, but my guess is I don't know the number, but like 10% or something, or 20%. It's not the majority.
Yeah, and again, this is up to you. At most schools, they provide some flexibility, particularly in the second year of the program, to take graduate courses in environmental studies, public policy, international relations, and other fields. What MBAs tend to do, to be honest, is those cohorts are very tight. People really get to know each other well, and they get to like each other. And that's a core part of what the value of the MBA is, because of the networking capability after you get the degree. So if you stray off into the other schools and colleges on a campus, to some extent you're weakening the bond that you have with your cohort.
Yes, I can understand that. Thank you very much for your responses. I'm not sure how we're doing with time, but I would love to ask 2 more questions.
Shoot.
Or should I save them for another panel? Do we have
No,
another
shoot.
panel?
It's okay.
Okay. First question about the format of MBA and your expert comment. Full-time, part-time, executive, evening, weekend. There's so many different formats. Pros and cons of each format.
That's a big question.
Wow, that's a big question. You know, I mean, you're right. You have the full-time, you have the executive MBA for older people, part-time for people who want to keep their job, or an online MBA for people who want to keep their job. But
he did a really good job of answering that as short. I think it depends on where you are in life.
Yeah.
I think if you can afford to take 2 years off work, that can be a more transformative work experience, because it's easier for you to switch industries when you do that. I think if you're in a job that you like and you're trying to climb within the organization, you might want to move too, but you're later stage, not time to take 2 years off, you know, just not where you are in life. There are outstanding executive MBA programs out there, as well as outstanding evening programs. That's more of a schedule thing. In my mind. And then online programs are even more. We don't offer that. I don't see that coming down the pike anytime soon. But there's no doubt that the quality of those programs has increased over the last few years.
Tying my second question into the first question, which format of, which delivery format allows, let's say, most flexibility to focus on your desired concentration, or allows you the greatest level of freedom to choose electives full-time? Okay.
Because what you'll find in either part-time programs or online programs, and even executive MBA programs, the portfolio of electives available to you is greatly diminished. In a full-time 2-year program, you're getting the vast majority of the electives that are offered. I mean, every elective isn't offered when you're going to be in school sometimes, but generally you're going to have far greater availability of courses to dive very deep into a subject that you have significant interest in and may be helpful to you in your career.
What's an average number of elective courses that an MBA offers? Does it greatly vary school from school, or is there sort of like an approximate number?
The structures vary. Okay, so at Darden,
About 30 credit hours are going to be elective. So If you back that down, that's essentially 20 1.5 credit. Our courses are 1.5 credit hours. They tend to span over 7 weeks, meeting twice a week, approximately. About 15 of those courses then would be 20 of those courses would be elective courses. Yeah, I could be off by one.
And Alfred, it sounded to me like your core is more concentrated.
Our core is more concentrated, and for the concentrations, they have to do 5 courses, and these are 3 credit courses. So 3 credit courses which meet to 3 hours a week for the full semester. And then you can do a few other courses. So, you know, depending on the size of the program, you have more opportunity to do electives. We run into some students who do, for example, they run their internship into the fall, and they miss some of the electives in the fall. They have only the winter electives. But there's the number of electives depends on how many students we have in the program. So a larger program will probably have a larger set of electives and a larger set of concentrations, which you can see on the respective school's website.
Great. And just a logistical question, are we on time? Is there another panel coming after this one? Or?
No, there isn't. So
Okay.
if anyone else has any questions, we'd be happy to answer them. Anybody else? Yeah, go ahead. Go right up to the mic. Thank you. Is that helpful to you? Yes, I have. Oh, okay.
Hi there.
And the other thing is, I'll just point out, you know, after this, there's a meet and greet, and there are plenty of people on all the tables, and people would be happy to answer any question you have on any topic related to MBAs and business education.
Hi there. My name is Ziki, and I have a question regarding grade disclosure during recruiting season events. So I came from business undergrad as well. So during recruiting season, during my time as undergrad, most of the times the grades are disclosed to all the potential employers, and I find that the top 30% of the people who's above the curve enjoy greater interview chances, and compared to some people who's below the average curve. So I guess my question's about, is it better to be a big fish in a small pond or a small fish in a big pond when it comes to recruiting, when it comes to opportunities?
Okay. I think I can handle that in a short. So we don't disclose grades, period, full stop. So the assumption of your question is not valid at the Darden School.
Okay.
We just won't do it.
And there are a number of schools that have non-disclosure grade policies. In fact, Cornell just passed one last week. It's not all schools are not that way, though.
I mean, at McGill in the province of Quebec, it's illegal to disclose grades.
Is it really?
So we have the strictest privacy laws in North America, which runs into we can't even give out email addresses without students' consent.
Okay, but let's say I'm a recruiter and I come to your school and I'm interviewing your students. Can I ask them, what were your grades? What's your GPA?
It's the student that can disclose.
Yeah, right?
It's the same. I don't hear too many instances of the question being posed in that direct of a manner. The student retains the right to do what they want to do, but we're not going to do it.
Yeah.
So.
And if the schools don't do it, and it's generally discouraged. I don't think there are many recruiters that actually ask at the MBA level. There are some that in fact do. And in the consulting firms, they will even ask you what your GMAT score was, right?
Yeah. And I think I'm going to add on one quick thing
Yeah.
to this. If you get into a good school, right, they're going to assume you're smart.
Yes.
It just kind of washes away. They're more looking for fit. You know, do you fit with the culture of the firm? Are you a person in this work is going to fit in? You're beyond the point of is he a smart guy or not such a smart guy? They know you're a smart guy. So the motivation isn't there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would just follow up with respect for consulting. We have a consulting prep program. And then we do internal selection. It's competitive. And so then when the consulting firms come, yeah, they take students from that group, but you already know in the first year whether you're going to be in that program.
Yes.
And so you're then selected and trained. And
Right.
whether they ask you for your grades or GMAT, they know you've been selected in this program. And they have lots of experience with evaluating candidates.
So let's take one more question. I think you had a question, right? And then we'll, are you okay?
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Rejabal, and I am looking to switch into sorry, I feel like I'm too close, to a social impact industry. The sticker price and the ROI are scary to me. I was just wondering if you had any advice for those who are looking to switch to industries that don't have as high of a salary as consulting and banking.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and there are a lot of people who are in your category who are going for MBAs today. What is the answer?
The two-part answer. One is a lot of what you would call traditional companies now sell themselves to students based on their social impact, and partly that's sheer competition on their level because they know they're not going to get you unless they show you what they're doing for the world, and that part of your job is going to be related to that. So that has changed somewhat. So I wouldn't be completely dismissive of what you might think of as a traditional employer, because there might be a lot more going on there than what you think. I will also say that in our experience at Darden, I can't speak for other schools. If I look at the leaders that we have as alums in nonprofits, I mean really big nonprofits, they often took for-profit jobs straight out of MBA and then got that experience because the big nonprofit employers or social impact employers really like to see that experience for a few years before they draw you into the system, because they want to see what's going on in the for-profit world that they can kind of leverage. So I mean, that's what I see.
Yeah, I would just second the comment. There's a lot of companies are looking for people who are interested in that, in social impact. And so we have a number of our students that are in that stream and are taking, they have a club and they are prepped for social impact consulting. And then they either go to firms that you mentioned, maybe don't pay so much, but also a lot of more mainstream firms are really hungry for folks with that interest in that background.
And if you wanted to go to a nonprofit organization or an NGO, for example, with an MBA, there are some schools that have loan forgiveness programs. There are some schools where alumni kick in money to give you a stipend for your internship because they know you're going to be poorly paid, but you'll get great psychic income for that, right? So there are some of those options out there as well. Generally, I think if you do go into a nonprofit or NGO with an MBA, you will get into a better nonprofit or NGO. Many of these places are not run very well, I will tell you. They're incredibly inefficient. So an MBA will get you into a better run organization that's having more impact on people generally, and will move you up quicker in the organization to a responsible position. So our time is definitely out. But I want to thank each and every one of you, and I'll answer your question later if you don't mind, for coming. And now, let me just tell you what's going to happen. So we have a bunch of schools out there, really terrific schools, and representatives from each of the schools. And we call this the meet and greet portion. And this is where you can go and just find out about how the programs are different from each other. And it gives you a good sense of, yeah, you know, can I fit there? Is this a possibility for me? What is the process of admissions really like at the school? Because one school differs from each other, even on the admissions part. And you can get really good detailed answers from those people out there. So I would encourage you to go and talk to as many people as you can. And we have some hors d'oeuvres, and we have a glass of wine that you might want to have, and just kick back and enjoy it. And meantime, good luck to all of you. You are on, or about to get on, a journey that will really transform your life. I am a true believer in the MBA degree. You'll be hard-pressed to find a bigger advocate. I think this is a degree that has great ROI. All the research shows that the people who go into MBA programs have very few regrets. Most people's expectations are exceeded, they're not only satisfied. And most people will tell you that it was one of the most formative, important experiences of their entire lifetime. And that's why we do what we do, because we think higher education has tremendous value, and it is the way for social mobility, but more importantly, in many cases for some people, it's a way to have a more meaningful job and a more fulfilled professional life. So good luck to all of you. And thanks, Ron. Thanks,
John.
Alfred.
Appreciate it.
Really
Thank you.
appreciate you coming.
Pleasure.
All right.